gets spicy. We have 2 defrags.
What's up YouTube, Capital G here, giving you guys a quick little card discussion on a nice little piece of spicy tech that popped up over last weekend at YCS Atlanta. This is a card that was seeing played by not just some of the best duelists of the entire event, it was actually on the top tables and it made it as far as the finals of the entire tournament. This wasn't just something that we saw in a feature match and then we didn't see it again. This card definitely went the distance, and the card we're going to be talking about is one that, truth be told, even I wasn't very familiar with. The card is Defrag Dragon, and this is a card that it's definitely not new, but I wouldn't consider it old either. It's from Flames of Destruction, and because I personally consider it such an obscure card, I will go ahead and briefly cover what the card actually does. So Defrag Dragon is from Flames of Destruction. It's a level 3 Dark Dragon monster. It has 1000 attack, 600 defense, and it says that you can special summon this card from your hand by sending one other monster from your hand to the graveyard. You can only summon or only special summon Defrag Dragon once per turn this way. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish 3 monsters from your graveyard with the same name, except another copy of Defrag Dragon. Special summon this card, you can only use this effect of Defrag Dragon once per turn. So when you really look at the card on paper, I don't really think that it sounds overly impressive. To be honest, I don't even think that it sounds like a card that would be played in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For this format, but somehow, some way, this card was ran in multiples of the Danger Thunder Dragon deck that was piloted by players like Aaron Furman and Jesse Cotton that made it all the way to the finals and ended up getting second place at Atlanta, and I really want to talk about why that is. For starters, I think that even if you take out the effects, Defrag Dragon just has a really good makeup for the Danger Thunder Dragon deck. You guys know that the deck has been ever evolving since its first release in Soul Fusion, and at this point it has as many forms as a Dragon Ball Z character. Right now, Thunder Dragons are very chaos based, and the deck has a whole lot of monsters that summon themselves by banishing other monsters, even if those monsters aren't necessarily like Thunder Dragons themselves. The fact that Defrag Dragon is Dark Attribute means that it's going to be useful in the graveyard after you've went ahead and linked it away. It's going to be useful fodder for cards like Chaos Dragon Levineer or White Dragon Color Serpent. So this card can be very useful in the graveyard just as a dark material monster to facilitate other monsters being dropped, usually bigger monsters in the process. The fact that it's a Dark Dragon is even better because now that it's a dragon monster, it can be useful for going into your Guard Dragon link plays. The Guard Dragon side of the Thunder Dragon deck is incredibly potent. It raised the ceiling of the deck, and the Guard Dragons basically give you those really big synchro monsters from your extra deck, the things like Hot Red Dragon, Archfiend Abyss, or even if you want to run Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, using Defrag Dragon as a monster to facilitate those plays is excellent. And then even at the same time, even if you're not using it specifically for the Guard Dragon plays, it still can be useful as link material for something like a Yugioh Skull Dread. Now, the fact that Defrag Dragon can unload itself out of your hand and put a body on board without using your normal summon is super impactful and also just very important for the Danger Thunder Dragon deck. Usually when you're playing Danger Thunder Dragons, your normal summon is going to be reserved for those super high impactful cards like Phantom Sky Blaster and maybe something like Batteryman Solar. This guy puts itself on board, thus making it a natural combo extender, but at the same time, I really like it because it works with any other monster in your hand. So if there's ever one of those situations where you're going into time or your opponent just has like an open field, maybe you didn't expect that, or you're just trying to summon a bunch of monsters to kill them, this is a card that works perfectly in those situations. And again, it works with basically any other monster in your hand. Now, there are some important things to know when it comes to special summoning Defrag Dragon from your hand. The most important thing I would personally say is the fact that it does not work with danger monsters. Unfortunately, Defrag Dragon sends from your hand to the graveyard. It does not actually discard, so it's not going to trigger your danger monsters. But don't fret, there are a lot of good applications. Number one, even though you do have to send a card from your hand to the graveyard to summon it, we've seen cards like that work in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! In the past. Things like Quick Draw Synchron and Dark Grepher instantly come to mind. But really, when you think about it, right? You're not taking that much of a neg, because if you do send a Thunder Dragon monster to the graveyard, usually you're going to banish that same Thunder Dragon monster later in your turn, and that Thunder Dragon monster is going to have some type of utility effect that generally is going to pay for itself. So if you send any of the Thunder Dragon monsters, it's really not that big of a deal. Those monsters are just going to like pay for themselves later. Also, if you draw some of the so-called bricks in the Danger Thunder Dragon deck, this card works fine with those as well. If you happen to, unfortunately drew something like Darkest Diablo, Yugiohs, Archbrave Dragon, or Morphic Goliath, perfectly fine to use Darkest Diablos as fodder to summon Archbrave, because that guy can special summon itself from the graveyard when you go into a Colossus for free, so that card obviously works. And even a Morphic Goliath, that's cool too, because he can special summon itself from the graveyard from the Archbrave effect. So a lot of those kind of big cards that you don't necessarily want to draw, the dragons, they kind of summon themselves from the graveyard anyways, so even if you do draw those, it's like a perfect way of getting them out of your hand. Now, one cool thing about this card is you look at that second effect, right, the one that special summons itself from the graveyard, and you think, how exactly am I going to pull that off? When am I ever going to have 3 copies of a card that has the same name in my graveyard and want to banish all 3? That's actually quite easy in the Thunder Dragon deck. For instance, let's say that you open with Defrag Dragon plus a copy of the original Thunder Dragon. All you got to do is take that Thunder Dragon, discard it for your second copy, discard the second copy for your third copy, use the third copy to summon your Defrag Dragon, link it away for something like a Guard Dragon Link monster, and then you'll have your Defrag Dragon in the graveyard plus all 3 of your Thunder Dragons. Thus you can banish those 3 and special summon your Defrag back for free. So basically you're making like really good advantage at that point. You're just getting link fodder for days. It even works in a very similar situation if you happen to open with Dragon Dark. Let's say you're going second, your opponent goes through their turn. During the end phase, you can get Dragon Dark in the graveyard by discarding a copy to add another. During your turn, you simply use that effect again. Now you just activate your Defrag in hand, pitching your last copy of Dragon Dark to the graveyard, link it away, and then the rest just becomes pretty self-explanatory. One of the really nice things about those plays where you're summoning Defrag Dragon from the graveyard and Thunder Dragon is not only is it ridiculously easy with the 2 examples that I just gave you, but you don't even have to technically draw your Defrag Dragon to summon Defrag Dragon from the graveyard. Some of you guys might be wondering, well, Cap, what exactly are you talking about? How am I going to have access to this card if I don't actually draw it? You guys forget that now Thunder Dragons are playing Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon, so they can send Defrag Dragon straight from the graveyard, and they can simply Monster Reborn it of its own effect by maybe banishing copies of Thunder Dragon that they already had earlier in the turn in the graveyard. So this card just naturally works so well. It can summon itself from the graveyard. It gives you massive fodder for the Guard Dragon plays. It works extremely well with the Thunder Dragons even when it's in the graveyard and you've already used the effect. You can still banish it with other cards, you know, Chaos Dragon, Levineer, and some of the other cards in the deck. So right now it is a little bit of a no-brainer that this card is being played. And at this point you might be wondering, is there another deck that Defrag Dragon can be fit in and actually work really well? And the answer to that is yes. I did insinuate earlier in this video that the card would be getting better in the future, and that is because you can run the card in Burning Abyss. For Burning Abyss, it's kind of a lot of the same reasons as Thunder Dragons, maybe not quite as good, but definitely it still has its applications. Number one, the card is a level 3 monster and it does special summon itself inherently. That means that it's going to be perfect for Cherubini when we get that in Dark Neostorm, and even if you don't have access to Cherubini, you could still go for a Dante play, or if Dante is more beneficial, you can go for that. The fact that it doesn't use your normal summon is excellent because now you can still unload it from your hand when you use your normal summon on things like, I don't know, maybe Tour Guide from the Underworld or another monster. And one of the good things is, very similar to Thunder Dragons, actually better than Thunder Dragons, the fact that it sends a monster from your hand to the graveyard is super important for Burning Abyss, because a lot of times there'll be an effect that you might want to actually resolve, but you don't want to have to commit that Burning Abyss monster for your normal summon. For instance, if you want to use Farfa's effect to like banish one of your opponent's monsters, you might not want to have to normal summon the Farfa, but you'll want to get Farfa's effect off. Now, if you had that Farfa in your hand plus a Defrag Dragon, you could simply pitch the Farfa from your hand, special summon your Defrag Dragon, go into your Link plays, or maybe your Burning Abyss standard Dante plays, and you could still use that utility effect, that Seer, that Farfa, that Skarm, without actually having to use your normal summon. And also, it can use unnecessary cards. We know that Burning Abyss has kind of evolved from basically like just a rank 3 deck into a deck that runs a whole bunch of like Link monsters and a lot of level 3 monsters that can kind of facilitate plays that don't really need to ever actually be normal summon. This means that things like Destrudo and things like Edge Imp Sabers, cards that can summon themselves from the graveyard, those are perfect kind of fodder for your Defrag Dragon. Right now, the only kind of inherent discard outlet that the Burning Abyss players have are pretty much the Nightmare monsters, but that kind of locks you into going for that specific play. If you have another way of getting those cards out of your hand, but at the same time putting level 3s on board, board a la Defrag Dragon, I think that it is something that you should potentially explore. Now, it would have been significantly better if Fairy Tale Snow had not been banned, because it would have been another way of getting Snow out of your hand without having to normal summon it, but unfortunately that did happen. But honestly, this card is excellent in Thunder Dragons. This card is very useful in a deck like Burning Abyss, and Burning Abyss are just going to get better when Dark Neostorm comes out. And I think the fact that you can draw things like Destrudo and Edge of Sabers and not have those cards just sit in your hand, now you can just discard them. You can put a level 3 on board. You can summon that monster from the graveyard and just continue to extend your plays. Actually makes this card very valuable. I mean, who honestly would have thought? But whatever you guys think of Defrag Dragon, if you have some other kind of interesting things to talk about when it comes to the card that maybe I didn't discuss in the video, go ahead and leave that in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on that notification bell for daily videos.